Sentando, que ya son más de las 10 y queremos intentar empezar puntuales. Hola, buenos días. Hola. ¿Se sent? No se sent. Ketty, vamos sentándonos, por favor. És que si no, no comencem. Són ja quasi 10. Si vols seure. Por favor, Vicente, ir sentándoos, por favor. Bueno, si os parece, vamos a ir empezando para intentar...
Okay, if you deem it appropriate, we will start to try and stick to the timetable. So welcome all to these Mediterranean sessions on road safety. This is edition number 25. And as you know, today we're going to present the guideline of good practices aimed at the justice agents. This guideline that has been presented and prepared in different sessions with different agents involved, with different legal topics involved, also with the presence of traffic victims who have given us their witnesses so as to understand what their needs are. This room is packed, and we are also being followed online. We are nearly 200 people altogether, face-to-face and online, so this makes me think that this is a topic of interest and that this is a very necessary guideline. It is true that Ole Thorsen is missing, our dear colleague. I would like to remember him here because he's always been the soul of our association. So this is the guideline, and I would like to say I'm so pleased to be able to present this project because this was born from a detected need. So in PAT, we detected that legal processes generate harm, added collateral harm. This is what we call secondary victimization. And this is why we believe it is so necessary, because it is true that the law is there and we need to apply it, but the way of applying it is important. We need to understand that the people who have just suffered a traffic accident are in a very vulnerable moment of their lives. So the manners, the way we convey the information, the way we accompany all of the process can determine the recovery process of victims, and this is why it is so necessary. As you know, this presentation is carried out in the World Day to recall the traffic victims, and this is why we're going to present the official video to get the right context. Please, video. As you can see, the slogan is to live with the impact, because you do not know what you feel until you experiment severe injuries or you lose someone in a traffic accident. And it is true that we are not exempt of experiencing a life experience like this. So this is a call for empathy, and this, I quote words of Francesc Torralba. He says that we have the obligation to get close with respect, empathy, with a dignified, human, caring, sensitive treatment.
Aquí, a ver si consigo la diapositiva.
I would like to show you the next slide now.
Simplemente deciros que personalmente
I would like to tell you that personally this has been a pleasure, and one of the basic things that we have done is to listen. It's a must to listen to one another, all of us participating and collaborating in the guideline. And it has been important to understand the position that we all hold so as to be able to develop and to create this guideline from that point onwards. So now it will be very interesting to listen to the participants of this first roundtable. We have Dr. Francesc Torralba, the director of the Professorship of Ethics and Ethics in Universitat Ramón Llull. He is the author of El Sentido de la Vida and many other books. He has directed the works of elaboration of the guideline from the Professorship Ethos and from PAT. I would like to thank him again for his collaboration. Personally, it has been an honor to be able to work with him. Together with him, we have Joan Puig Pey, Vice President of PAT, an architect, and Rosa Maria Lemos, the delegate of PAT in Granada. So now we are going to listen to Joan first, then Rosa, and finally we will hear from Dr. Torralba. Good morning. Well, I am an architect and we're here, but I would like to start my presentation. I finished my studies many years ago and I visited the Louvre Museum in a trip to Paris. And in Louvre, we all know very well the objects that we can find there. There was a cylinder, a huge stone that was sculpted 2,000 years ago, and that represents situations in which the justice intervenes. And it is written in a stone. It's like the Moses tables. This is a symbol to say that not even the king has the ability to modify these stones. So when seeing this, I was impressed by some decrees, 129, I think it was, that says if the architect that builds a house, the house crumbles down and the person dies, there will be an execution of the architect. So also the son of the architect would be executed if the architect is not there. So This is the Italian law, and in the Bible that was also depicted there. So this was a great advance of contention, of vengeance. And this is a term which is also in our guidelines, and it makes us think about the right word that we should have here, the emotions that we're talking about. An image is worth 1,000 words, although a word is also very powerful. So I have prepared here with me some mimics for you. These are 3 situations that I have experienced myself in a concentrated period of time, and they have a common denominator. It's very easy to guess. You will guess it very quickly. But the particularity of this is that these are different contingencies, different moments. Well, I'm not going to give you any further hints. Just observe.
Voy a llamar a esto, vamos a comer, se llama contingencia.
I will call this contingency.
¡No! Común denominador.
What is the common denominator?
Una pérdida.
A loss,
Dolor.
pain.
¿Qué es perder?
What is to lose? Well, there are contingencies in life in which an object, a person, a situation disappears forever and ever.
Si no, sería un extravío. Es otro concepto, ¿no?
Otherwise, we would just have lost it. No, this is a loss. And when there's a loss, there is a pain. And to face this pain, we start a mourning process. Well, in this process, much has been written on it, and Lisa Rowe, the American psychologist in '69, was already saying and was already identifying from an emotional point of view these different stages of pain. The stage of negation, of rage, of negotiation, the stage of depression, and finally, the acceptance stage, with pluses and minuses, with different loops, but this emotionally is the process that we experience. So in this process of an accident, well, the loss is death, so there's a lot of pain. And in this mourning process, we have the legal agents involved. In a moment like this was already happening 4,000 years ago, as I was saying at the beginning. And in this moment in which the person is totally, because they're not injured, they're dead, the person is totally crumbled down, well, there's professionals coming in and they talk about the degree of responsibility of the person who's sitting there. And what happens is that sometimes in my negation, my despair, well, sometimes I go to justice with an objective which is not the right objective. I need to be listened. Many times you're walking and you're listening. So the human person gets to the justice institution where there's other human beings there, but they need to develop there a task, a technical, excellent task. And sometimes my expectation is not fulfilled there. But then to all of these legal agents, I can tell them that this humanity degree treatment is a must. It's indispensable to accompany the solutions and also the victim, this person.
Este sencillo documento son
This
30 pautas
simple document is along this line, that we are, as human beings, at a precise moment in grieving, and I'm sorry if the gentleman doesn't speak into the microphone, we can't hear him, and I hope this in my kids' language, they'll say, this is not just going to be, a waste of time. No, but this really, sorry, I need some water. It's a newborn child, and neonatal kids, we help them grow, and we're happy when we see the first tooth coming out and things. So there are 30 guidelines, but there's much more to it. It's a compendium of life, if you like, even though it's a technical document. To me, it's I always find symbolic readings in things, and this document was born at a time of pain for some of us. Ramón, 50 years ago, in his mythical song, The Wind, he sang the wind, facing the wind. And it's born, it's a great cry, it's a great scream, but life is this scream, this cry. The kid grows, it's a cause of satisfaction to see a project growing. And, I laughed a lot, but the experience that we've had with the gestation and development of this guide, I'm sorry if the gentleman turns his head, we can't hear him. And I'm sorry, I can't hear him well enough to interpret him. And we've had this experience and we're going to persist with it. Thank you very much.
Adelante, Rosa.
Rosa, the floor is yours. I don't know if you can hear me, but God help me because I'm very nervous. Well, good morning to you all. First and foremost, I would like to thank the PACTA Association for the work that they are doing and for giving us the opportunity for me to be able to tell my story. Secondly, I would like to thank all of you for being here today and for your good predisposition for when there is a traffic accident to sort out in a just form whatever has happened as occurred with my kid. Before starting to tell you my story, I'd like to ask you guys a question. Would you drive a vehicle, a car in this case, if you were blind? Can anyone answer? No, of course not. Obvious. It would be unbelievably dangerous if you couldn't see. Okay, well, now I'm going to tell my story. My son, David, was 21, had many dreams he wished to come true. He was all my life. He was my only child. And I'm sorry. And we're from Granada, but he went to another place to work in the grape picking. And at the end of one working day, he was passenger in a car. David, like any kid of his age, was joking around with a friend. At 2034, he didn't answer the WhatsApp messages of his friend. At that time, Mario, a 16-year-old who worked where David worked, his messages stopped with a friend who was also on the road in Zamora. Ruben, who was 28, was driving the car and stopped on the hard shoulder, which also went a little way over into the lane, the first lane. There was a truck stopped, Ankel's truck, and Ankel got out because the ramp at the back of his vehicle, the hook had broken on it, and he was afraid that the load was going to drop out, and he stopped to sort out the problem. Well, then it was a working day, a Wednesday. There wasn't much traffic. It was a clear night. It wasn't raining. It was a straight piece of road. According to the police reports, the visibility was 970 meters there, a kilometer, according to the expert in traffic accidents who also carried the defense of Angel. And the witnesses said that it was perfectly visible to see the truck stopped if somebody were paying proper attention to the road and could see the obstacle in the road. But the car that Ruben was driving didn't slow down nor attempt to avoid it. Well, this truck had thousands of lights on it, and the question at the trial, both the civil guard and the emergency team, the people who went to the scene, said that everything was very clear. Everyone saw it except for Ruben, the driver, which when the civil guard asked him, when were you aware that the truck was stopped on the hard shoulder? He said, well, it was after hitting it on getting out of the car that I saw it, which, you know, he didn't try to stop or brake at all. He just went straight into the back. And why do you think he did that? Well, because he was blind because he'd had huge amounts of cocaine and cannabis. And obviously, in that situation, a person should never drive a car. But this guy, who was not a kid, he was 38, he was driving. According to the civil guards information, they saw that the driver was showing signs of euphoria, walking along the side of the road with his mobile phone. So they tested him for drugs. the saliva test. They weren't able to get a lot of saliva because his mouth was very dry, but notwithstanding, it gave a positive for cocaine and cannabis. They decided to take a blood and urine test. They sent it to the lab, the blood and the urine, and the civil guard said that while the people were doing the test, they saw that the driver showed signs of having taken some drugs. Dry mouth, he was red, eyes red, euphoria, and once in the ambulance, he relaxed and was somnolent. And they added, the signs observed in the driver coincide with the physical effect caused by drugs. And they detected cocaine and cannabis. And in folio 43, they say, the accident has been caused by a supposed distraction or want of attention to driving under the influence of drugs, stupefactants, or psychotropic substances. Moreover, in addition to this, in the glove compartment, they found a bag together with his driving license. They found a ball of hash. And I say, well, just because of that, if somebody is driving, which, he was driving at 150 kilometers an hour because that's where the speedo was stuck when the accident happened. He had external signs of having taken drugs, and the saliva test showed that. And on top of that, there was a ball of hash in the glove department. I mean, the person should get a good fine for that, if nothing more. I mean, you understand this better than I. Well, the case was held before the Provincial Court of Zamora. Both the civil guard and the DA and the expert, the forensic expert, when asked by the attorney, said that the guy was not in a state in which he couldn't drive, and the forensic expert said nobody believes this. I mean, come on, nobody could believe that. He said, that is to say, all of these people who were not involved on any way said that Rubin not only had huge amounts of drugs, but also at the time of the accident, he was under the effects of it. Okay, so when this is assumed by Fernando Gil, who is a chair in law, who presented a detailed report and said that according to what we could see from the tests, this man had taken these drugs at least 1 hour or 1.5 hours before the accident. So at the time of the accident, he was still under the effects of the drugs. He made reference to several authors that underscored that a driver should be sanctioned if the level of cocaine in plasma is over 0.025 milligrams per liter. This gentleman had 0.25, 10 times more. So it also refers to several court findings, and I've got one in which it said that a driver had run over a cyclist who, thank God, did not pass away, but he had 7 times less drugs in his blood than this gentleman, and he was found guilty. So I'm asking, what kind of justice is this? How does it measure things? Is it different if you're one person or another? I mean, this guy had 7 times less drugs in his blood than Rubin. Nobody died, and he's in prison. And notwithstanding, this guy today is not. So I'm sorry. I need to drink. The case was heard by the Provincial Court of Zamora, and this guy was imprisoned for 5 years, 7 years of removing the driving license and legal costs. That seemed to be very little to us, but the law has changed in favor of the criminal, something we don't understand, because before it was on the side of the victim. Now it is the what is actually done, regardless of what happens to the victims. That's our justice system. Okay, well, we have to take it on board. It didn't seem too much to us, but we accepted it. Imagine our surprise when the mother of Rubin, who's an attorney in Zamora, went to the Supreme Court of Castilla Leon, and this court found that we should absolve Ruben, and he will be condemned just to pay 3,000 euros for the victim, 2.5 years of withdrawing his driving license, 4 had gone by, and he doesn't have to pay the costs. Ridiculous. All the taxpayers have to pay for that. Crazy. And in view, and when we received this news, we were just, couldn't understand it. We're not in this field, but we're not idiots, So I wrote to the ombudsman, and I sent them the 2 findings, both of both courts, the Supreme Court and the Provincial Court. And this gentleman said, the ombudsman said several things, but amongst them he said, in view of the judicial resolutions that are so different, produced up to now, what without a doubt, it's caused you and I incomprehension and perplexity. So my question is, okay, on the one hand, let's forget about Fernando Gil, who is a person, chair in law. I'm going to forget about Carlos Morales, who was the expert who defended Angel because of the lights and things. And I'm going to focus just on the person, the independent person, the independent authority, which could be as good as the police report and the report of the DA, who was in favor of us because the evidence was clear, and a forensic doctor of the toxicological department of the University of Madrid. And with these laboratory evidence, So what has the court based this on? The Supreme Court. God knows, I don't understand. I don't understand what kind of justice this is. I don't understand the justice. Look, why should we, after 4 years, be battling? My kid was the victim. We are the victims. We feel unprotected. Not only can I not grieve the death of my kid, not only can I not collapse, because I've got to be there, because justice has not played its part, and I've got to be there battling on TV programs, in the press, so that people will listen to me, so that this is not just an administrative fine, full stop. What the hell kind of things are we teaching our kids? Yeah, kids, you can drive as fast as you want, up to your eyeballs with drugs, and if you kill somebody, it doesn't matter. Your parents pay 10,000 and that's it, ha. That's what we want. That's the justice system we want. That's what our kids want. That life, is not worth anything. Do you know what it means? If psychologically, physically, and why not also economically as well? I cannot imagine families who can't, defend their loved ones, and far less the victims who don't have any family to support them. Where are we? Where the hell are we? We are people. And in this case, 3, one of which was my son. My husband and I have appealed before the Supreme Court. We hope that court, the Supreme Court, is going to be professional, as was the Provincial Court of Zamora. My story is never going to have a happy ending, because my son David has died. The protagonist of my story is dead. My son has died. But in this story, there are many other important people. And that's all of us. All of us who are here, because it could happen to any of us. If I'm fighting, it's for my son, but also so that none of you, if unfortunately something were to happen to you, it shouldn't, but to go through what I'm going through, I don't want you to face a finding which comes from such an illogical, inhumane jurisdiction. You should never have to face it. We need to change it, because this could happen to any of us. As I said, the important people here are all of us, and I hope that with the help of God, the story of my son, I mean, it's not going to have a happy ending, but at least a just ending, because obviously, as you understand, 5 years of jail for one person and a family who are the living dead, it's not fair, but at least to have a dignified ending, because he deserves it. Thank you for listening to me.
Adelante, Francesc.
Francesc. Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes, you can hear me. Thank you. Thank you. In first place, good morning. Thank you, Jordi. Thank you, Juan, for your testimonial. The grief that you've suffered and how you've suffered it, moreover, in such a graphic way. And thanks to you, Rosa, for this huge effort that you've made to express such a complex, emotionally intense situation that you're experiencing, and moreover for your generosity to come from Granada to share your situation here in Barcelona. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And please, God, that this very difficult, complex situation could be adequately resolved. To me, I'm going to, above all, present this document, in effect. It's great news to have this. It's a guide of good practices, best practices. A guide of best practices is not a legal document. It's not a juridical document, but it attempts to identify the attitudes that victims expect from those that operate in the institutions of justice. And to draw up this document, it was essential to bring together different perspectives of the players involved in this space, in this scenario. And that's why it was essential to hear the voices, very carefully hear the voices of the victims, which is a story which obviously is deeply involved and has a deep emotional burden, with a mix of indignation, impotence, in cases anger, bitterness and resentment. It's logical. It forms part of the process of grief that these toxic situations or disturbing situations create. But also, we wanted to hear the voices of those who are in the institutions of justice, and thus we were lucky enough to be able to count on the participation of judges, of district attorneys, of attorneys, and also other figures that could help us with this mediation. There's philosophers, sociologists, so that we were able to understand all of the different outlooks that were involved. There is a philosophical current which I'm interested in, which is called perspectivism, which means that the object, the situation, could be seen from very different points of view. This room, let's look at this room. And there is no absolute perspective. Each perspective is expressed from a certain angle from which we see what has happened and how it's happened, and the other person, from their angle of vision of the object, sees it in a different way. And the idea was to bring together these different views and to develop a document which, on the one hand, could underscore the attitudes that we expect from the legal operators, and on the other, the kind of sensitivity, empathy we expect from our judges, from our attorneys, from the district attorneys, from all of these professionals who every day are working in the institutions of justice, attempting to resolve and find fair sentences. I mean, to err is but human, and of course we can err, as doctors, surgeons do, teachers do, and attorneys do, all of us. The result is this guide. This guide has 30 articles, and each article is a guideline, a practical guideline of how to act and how to proceed. So I'm going to underscore a few ideas which I believe to be important. First of all, we greatly underscore the need for the victim to be heard, their voice to be heard, and to be able to participate actively in this process, to be heard, to be accompanied from the very outset, from ground zero, the time of the accident. When there is an accident, that means that there is a situation that Jasper would call a limit situation. Everything collapses. They need this accompaniment right from the moment of ground zero, a psychological, emotional accompaniment. But moreover, there's another element which we underscore greatly in the dialogue that we had with people who are here in the hall, and which were very significant contributions: language. The language we use. One thing is the language of the victim. We've seen it in two very different examples here. The language of the victim is a narrative, autobiographical, emotionally intense language, which at times the verbal discourse breaks because there are cries, silence, tears, sighs, screams. There are screams. The legal language is a very different form of articulation, radically different. The judges speak in a different way. Attorneys have another language. The district attorneys another, the philosophers, psychologists, sociologists, IT people, all of us have our own language. The thing is, we bring together people who speak in very different languages, and one hopes to understand something, but they don't understand the terminology, the technical, precise terminology used by the others. We're talking about judicial science, but basically they're talking about what's happened to me and has radically changed my life. My son, my sister, daughter, husband, whatever, and they don't understand what's going on. They don't understand all of the procedure, all of the bureaucratization, and all of the findings. And here we find a want of understanding, impotence, which obviously generates in the victim ire, anger. They feel that they're not protected, they're helpless, they want to be heard, accompanied, and we need a linguistic pedagogy to understand, obviously, the stages of the process, to understand that, where I am, what this word means, what that other word means. I'll give you an example. This language, the problem we have with other disciplines, for example, when you take your computer to an IT expert to be repaired and the IT guy says, what's wrong with it? If you're not an IT expert or a technologist, by the second word, you don't understand it. But we're talking about an object, an artifact, which is called a computer. At the end of the day, the guy says, okay, that's going to cost you €300. That's it, but I don't know exactly what they've done because I don't understand that. But here we're talking about people, not artifacts. Here we're talking about human beings and about severe disruption. So here it's essential to listen, to accompany, and this pedagogy which allows us to understand what is going on and why.
And also in the notary, for example, when there is an inheritance process, there is this notary language. But we could have a pedagogic approach before. It's like, this is what's going to happen, and they adapt it to their language. Adaptation is a must. And also we should avoid the re-victimization. We mentioned this, and we've seen this in machoist victims, abuse victims, ill treatment victims. We need to avoid this because the grief process has its own tempo. And the fact of not having finished the process, it is very difficult to have a normal grief process. And sometimes it can become an obsessive pathological grief process because of that. Because if you have to experience over and over again a specific situation and to talk to the different agents in the scene about what you experienced, that activates some emotions that you wanted to keep aside, and they come back to life again strongly, and this is painful. So the idea of re-victimization is also key, as well as the issue of time. The grieving time, it's different to the justice time, especially when processes are so slow because of bureaucracy and because of the absence of human resources. There is an accumulation of pending processes. But how can I close my grieving process if the legal process is still opened or not closed as I wanted it to be finished? So here tempos are different, and that has a psychological impact on the person. So as much as possible, we should be agile in these processes, especially compensations. There's an article on this, everything that we can make more agile, especially the compensation. Well, it will never make up for the absence or the loss, but at least it's like some support. So at least compensation should be as agile as possible. In the guideline, we also talk about the need of having a unique reference point in the legal process, because many times there is information and communication problems. So it is key for that family, that person, to have a reference, a person they can go to and that they can get the information of how the process is going in a didactic manner. So what resources they can claim, what can they do, because there are some people who are well trained that can guarantee that, but there are some people who cannot have that clear information. So if the situation is unbalanced, there will be a situation of injustice, and they might abandon in the process. Two other ideas that are very important to underline are the following. One thing is the repair of the victim and what we call compensation, and the other one is to dictate a sentence in justice. Sometimes there are some expectations that are created and that the justice cannot meet. For example, the loss of a human being cannot be compensated by justice. It cannot be compensated with anything, because that human being is unique. Joan, you expressed this very well. When you lose an object, such as a car or your wallet or your purse, you can get angry. But if you can buy another car. But the drama of the loss of a human being that I have experienced myself not long ago, it's a radical absence. It's a huge void. There is nothing that can cover, that can make for that gap. Even if you have other children, other friends, other beloved ones, nothing can compensate for that loss. So what I'm trying to say is that this pain is not going to be met by a justice institution. It's not going to be met by them. And sometimes we have some expectations, but the pain situation is not going to be solved. Even if we have some resolutions or sentence that we think it's just, it's fair, we might think that justice has been applied, but there's still a void. Judges carry out their task, and they have to do that. But victims need to be accompanied psychologically, emotionally, and all of them should be able to have that accompaniment, not just those who can pay for it. We need to make this emotional, psychological approach universal. This is key in our country. And one last element I would like to underline, that guideline is already giving us a hint of a future document in those 30 articles that are part of these guidelines. It's a must to have restorative justice processes or mediation processes. What I mean by that is that in the conversation that we had in those moments, one of the victims was an active part of this document, and they said, well, look, the person who caused the tragedy, he lives in my neighborhood nearby, and he has not even felt repented by what they did. They haven't said sorry. And I see him often in the neighborhood. And the victim was saying, well, if I had got that repentment from him, well, that would have an impact in my grieving process. But he has not even expressed this. So what's interesting to say it here is that justice institutions need to implement justice and carry out justice and take into account the different stories to understand exactly what happened. But there's also the mediation and restorative processes as well. And with some victims, these other processes have had a healing effect. Here I'm talking about other kinds of victims, terrorism victims, gender victims, ill treatment victims. That mediation has had a healing effect. These are some elements that are not included in this guideline, but we also mention it in the guideline because it's an important element to take into account. Maybe the victim won't be able to forgive. It's quite possible because they won't be able to forget, and maybe they won't be able to forgive for that specific moment. That tempos that we need for expressing, for forgiving, it's quite mysterious. But if the victimizer of the accident is showing repentment, true wholeheartedly repentment because of how they were driving, etc., that could have a positive effect. And in some cases there's victimizers that caused an accident, but there was no intention to cause the accident, and they were not under the drug effects, so it was just a distraction. And they are also tortured by that harm that they have caused to that family, although they have already paid injustice. An injustice entity. So it's important to listen carefully to victims, but in some victimizers, the pain that they might experiment of having caused that harm, sometimes to unknown family relatives of theirs, there was a distraction and they survived, but maybe the spouse or the grandmother or the son or the daughter died in that accident, and they feel that pain too. So in this guide, we underline attitudes that can improve this attention. So this is why we thank you all for the group work that has been done by all of the agents, and this has been done generously because no one got paid for the participation of this guide, and there were a lot of meetings, there were a lot of conversations, and we want this to be well disseminated. We want the guides this guide to be widely disseminated. We have it in Catalan, in Spanish, it will be translated into English, and the idea is to use these guides in the situations where in the situations where it could be applied, because we want professionals to have this attitude of empathy. Victims are not always right. They're not always right, but they need to be listened closely, attentively. We cannot make them invisible. We cannot keep them aside because they are bothering. So I congratulate Pat for this initiative and everyone who has made it possible here. Some of them are present. Thank you very much for giving me the possibility to present it here to you. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Francesc.
Thank you, Francesc. Thank you, Joan and Rosa, for your testimonials, so intimate testimonials that have conveyed these very hard experiences, but that help us understand the scope of what we are tackling here. I don't know if you have any questions. I don't know if someone among the audience wants to make the most of this Q&A time that we have. We have 5 minutes. If you have any comments, questions, we have a rolling mic.
Un momentito, que así se oye también online.
Buen día, buenos días. Solo una pequeña
Good morning. Just some food for thought. After listening to Francesc, who has explained very well how these guides were developed, and I was listening to the direct testimonials of Joan and Rosa Maria. Well, these days we talk a lot about this tension that society is experiencing, that society is suffering, they have opposite feelings. And we talk about feelings a lot these days. Even in the Congress, in the debate right now, we talk about feelings. So maybe we haven't mentioned the word road safety or traffic accident. I don't know. After so many long hours of debate, well, someone has conveyed how much we suffer here. So that's why I loved what Joan said. There's lots of contingencies, but the real contingency is when you lose a beloved one in an unexpected way. And this is an undesired contingency, and justice could do more about it, probably with a different technique, a different approach, but this is the justice that we want. Sometimes we should not act blindly, and we should see who we have in front of us. We should have this empathy. This is free. It's about trying to understand at all time that behind all of these cumbersome procedures, legal processes, there's people who are suffering, and they are somehow expecting not what they really wished, because they cannot have their beloved ones back, but at least they are expecting to feel closer to these legal entities, and also to have rulers that help us have less traffic accidents, because if we have less traffic accidents, we will have less suffering and more freedom for everyone. So this was my food for thought, and thank you very much, Pat, for the effort of developing this tool, which is aiming at changing behaviors. So if this is a newborn baby, let's take good care of it. Thank you. Thank you, Jordi. I don't know if anyone else would like to add something, any comments, any questions. After an accident in which there is a loss of a human life, now with the perspective of some years, if you ask me, what do you remember? I do not remember the words. You're like floating, but you do remember the hug of someone, the kiss of someone, walking around with a friend for a whole afternoon. I do not even remember what we talked about, but we were walking for 5 hours. It's accompaniment, Jordi. It's this, what this is about. And from the very beginning, This is healing. At least as an architect, I can say that at least that is establishing the foundations so that the process advances in the right direction. Thank you, Joan. Joan mentioned a sentence before. The power of love is greater than the power of death. And I believe that this love, this accompaniment, at the end of the day, we're talking about love, empathy, standing in someone else's shoes. And I think that this is very important in this case. Sorry, because before I couldn't display my slides properly, but if you allow me, I will mention everyone that has participated in the guides, because it's important to mention all of them. Some of them are here, some of them are online because they were not able to be here, but I'm going to mention them all. First of all, Ethos, the chair Ethos from Ramón Llull. We have Francesc Torralba, Guillem Martí Soler. They have been dynamizing, they have been working intensively in the creation of these guides. And in the sessions of focus groups, we had the participation of Jordi Jané, Rosa Mendez, also from the audience of Barcelona, Guillermo Benyoc, a judge in the crime section 27 Barcelona, Isabel López, attorney of road safety in Catalonia, Maria Eugenia Pons de Gironella, lawyer specialist in traffic, she's also here. Eugenia Domènech, she has not been able to be here. She's a lawyer specialist in traffic and representative of the victims associations in the follow-up commission. Vicente Sanchez, president of PAD, Joan Puigpey, the vice president of PAD, Enrique Rodriguez, vocal of PAD, myself as a psychologist, and I would also like to mention all of the victims that have shared their testimonials: Beatriz Corral, Gina Judas, Rosa María Lemos, Isabel Parera, Inmaculada Prados, and also Maxim Capell. Thank you all for your collaboration, because you've made possible these guides. So without further ado, if there's no more comments, we'll have a coffee break now, and the next session will be in English. So if you need headsets for translation, you should grab them now so that we can understand the next session. Thank you very much.